When the Rebbe was Magia Lekutei Sichos, many times he would take the opportunity, if it fit into the Siche, to write something very practical, something that was very negay at that time. And I'm going to give two examples. One example is in Lekutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Gimel, Parshas Bolok. This was a Sicha that came out in the Likud in Tovshin Lamed Gimel. And the Sicha talks about the Posik Mateva Alecha Yankiv that Bilam said, how good are your tents, Yidden? And Rashi says he meant that he saw how the doors of their tents are not one across each other because of Tznius. And the Rebbe explains the whole Rashi and all the Inyonim, and then he says what the lesson from here is, the importance of Tznius. And he said also, we see from here that not like some people think, that only major things connected to Tznius are important. But when it's minor things, it's not so important to be careful. So here we see that even when they talked about Matevo Oyhalecha Yaakov, Oyhalecha is a tent is a temporary dwelling, and even here it's important Tznius. And then the Rebbe continued in the Sicha that a person might still listen to the Yetzer Hara who says, when is it so important? Only when you're in a permanent situation. But when you're in a temporary place, then it's not so important to be medagdik so much, to be careful so much in tznius and in every little bit of tznius. So the lesson is that even in that you have to be very careful. So on these words, where the Rebbe says in the Sicha that one might think that if you're in a temporary place, it's okay, the Rebbe wrote the Ha'orah. And these are the words that he wrote. The kan hamokim lahadgish. And now I want to stress something that's important for this time of the year, because this Sikh is in summertime. And he says these words, those who are mekel, and the words makilim he puts in quotations, in many inyonim of tzviyas, in the summertime, especially when they're found in a temporary dwelling outside of the city. It means when you're in the country, people think you could be mekel. And some even say, echte v'oshuv. The Gemara says a lashon, echte v'oshuv. Someone shouldn't say, I will sin, but I could do tshuva. But the Rebbe used the lashon to play on words, echte v'oshuv, I will sin, and oshuv, I will return, meaning do tshuva, when I come back to the city. A person shouldn't say that. And the Rebbe continues and says, this is negaya to the behavior of men also, certainly to women, because each one of the women is called an akeres habayis. And then the Rebbe says there's much more to say about it, but this is not the place. When the Rebbe wrote this ha'orah, he wrote on the side, to us, to the Vad, he said that make this ha'orah, put it in a place that will be the most obvious and people will see it more, they'll stress it more. And the Rebbe gave two options. Or it should be printed separately in the back of the Likud. The Likud was a full Likud of the Sikh, and the back, make it separate, that it should be seen as separate. Or put it as ha'orah on the bottom of the page, but put it in bold words. And we talked about it and we decided that we want to put it that way, that will attract more attention. So in the Sicha, in Chelik Yud Gimel, page 84, there's a ha'orah here in bold words, which is usually not there, but this is in bold words because the Rebbe wanted to take the opportunity, people should be aware. Another thing was, this was Tovshin Lamed Ches, which was right after the Rebbe had a heart attack, Parshas Noach. So the svara was maybe not to give in the Sicha for the Rebbe to be Magia. The decision, the Rebbe wanted it, so we gave it in. The people who wrote it gave it in. And the Rebbe, while he was laying in bed, wrote something very strong, not just Magia. He wrote not just a paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs with his own handwriting. And he was doing it while laying in bed. When I saw the ksav, you could see this ksav was shaky because he wrote it while he was laying in bed. And this is what he writes. And I'm going to read it, not in the original Yiddish, but I'm going to read it in English. This is in Chelik, in Lekutei Sichos, Chelik Tesvav, page 43. And this is what the Rebbe says. In the Sicha, the Rebbe talks about that science, secular science, before Mashiach, will get closer to the understanding of the unity of Hashem. And then the Rebbe says like this, but at this point I have to bavon, even though it's obvious by itself, it's self-understood, that all this that I'm saying here about what they will get to, the science will get to, has no connection to the question about learning in college or in the university and kayetze b'zeh. Because over there it's a isur chomor. He says it's a strong aveire. And it's a sakone. Then the Rebbe says, chamira sakante mi yisure. A sakone, a danger, is worse than the isur. And the Isur, there's a sakana there and the Isur there. Because the whole atmosphere and the whole ashkofe of the Daled Ames in these institutions nowadays is absorbed full of denial of kfire, denial in Ashgacha Protis, of the Eibishter. According to them, there is not one thing or one power that could get mixed into the way the world runs and the rules of the running of the world. In other words, there's no Eibishter. This is accepted there as a self-understood thing that you don't even have to prove it. And this is the foundation that Rebbe says, and he underlines the word Yesod, foundation, to the whole studying these places, that they don't even have to mention it because that's self-understood by them. And in most of the times, they learn Thionim of Apikurses, believing in Avodah Zarah, V'chulu, etc., and underlined word, etc. And then the Rebbe says, in Ruben Kekulam, in most of these places, there is no boundaries of embarrassment or tznius. They even laugh and they try to make litzones, fun, of those that they are careful with it. And Adarabe, anybody who is less tznius, more pritzes, is even greater, v'chulu. And then the Rebbe says, it's known, the outrageous situation there in the campuses. He says the word campuses, dormitories, places where you walk, etc. And the Rebbe says, I don't want to go further into something that's very outrageous in such a terrible way. And then he says, but someone could have a taina, and the word taina is in quotation, the famous taina, that he or she, it won't hurt them, and he'll be able to withstand the nisyanis, all the hardships. So we know the simple answer. The simple answer is that even a tzaddik gomor, even the last day of his life, the last day of his 120th year on this world, in the beginning of the day, before he even davens, has to ask the Eibishter, Al t'vi'einu l'dei nesoin, don't bring me to a test because that's a problem. So no one could say that I don't mind if I'll have a test. And then the Rebbe says, V'yesh l'hayrich kama v'kama v'ein kamekemi. I could even say more and more, but this is not the place. So we see here what was on the Rebbe's mind, and he took the opportunity when the Sichos spoke about science, to write while he's in bed, after the heart attack, to write all this that I said was written in Yiddish by the Rebbe himself. And there are other places where the Rebbe did such things, but I just gave 2 examples.